The thought of the Infinity Gem sent a shiver down his spine. Was it possible that, somewhere along the line, this universe's version of Tony Stark had somehow absorbed the same fate as his comic counterpart? Or had it always been there, buried deep within him, waiting to awaken? Was it because he messed with the events of this reality? Too many questions popped up in his mind, but this time he failed to find any answers. Fuck it. Grabbing the jacket, he rushed out of his lab and took a cab straight to the hospital to get a checkup. On the way to the hospital, Tony's mind continued working overtime, and then there was that pain. Despite that, he pulled out his tablet and hacked into the hospital's database. It was like a piece of cake for someone who hacked into the Pentagon and Hydra's network to hack into a weak secured network. He found the neurology department and managed to schedule an appointment for the same day with the chief neurologist, Dr. Evelyn Harrington. This was the only way to skip the long wait and the red tape that usually comes with a 16-year-old trying to get medical help without their parents' permission. Tony marked the appointment as urgent but kept the description simple, just mentioning headaches, dizziness, and feeling unwell. Besides that, he ordered Hermes to do a background check on the doctor and find anything that he could use to make a deal in case she asked for parental consent. It didn't take too long for the AI to pull out the data. Now this is some nice shit, he thought, reading the data. The cab pulled up to Massachusetts General Hospital, and Tony paid before stepping out, trying to appear composed. He adjusted his jacket and walked quickly into the lobby. At the front desk, the receptionist glanced up from her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, eyeing him curiously. "Yep, Stark. Should be under Anthony Stark." The receptionist typed in his name. After a moment, her expression shifted to one of surprise. "Dr. Harrington will see you in 10 minutes. Please take a seat." "Thanks," Tony replied, moving to the waiting area. He sat down, tapping his fingers nervously against the armrest. His head still throbbed, and the buzz of activity in the waiting area made it worse. Minutes later, a nurse called his name. He followed her to a consultation room, where Dr. Harrington was already reviewing his file. She looked up as he entered. "Anthony Edward Stark?" "That's me," he said, forcing a casual tone. Dr. Harrington was in her late 40s, blonde, and she was wearing a glass. "I see here that you've been experiencing headaches and dizziness. How long have these symptoms been occurring?" Tony leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "It started a few days ago. The pain wasn't too bad at first, but now it's pretty intense. Like something's pressing against my skull. It's been hard to concentrate." He didn't mention anything about the sudden burst of clarity in his mind. That wasn't something he wanted anyone investigating. Dr. Harrington took note of his description, her expression neutral but attentive. "Have you had any other symptoms, like nausea, trouble seeing, or trouble speaking?" "No," Tony said quickly. "Just the pain. And sometimes I get a little dizzy." "Oh, I might have passed out twice 3 days ago." He left out the parts about his mind moving a million miles a minute and his ability to process information in ways he couldn't explain. That was something he could barely understand himself. Dr. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "All right. We'll do a basic neurological exam, and based on the results, we can determine if imaging tests are necessary." Tony agreed, trying to relax as she tested his reflexes and coordination. As she did, his mind kept racing, ticking off calculations and designs in the background. But he kept his face neutral. When the physical tests were complete, Dr. Harrington stepped back, evaluating her findings. "Your reflexes and coordination are normal, which is a good sign. However, the pain and dizziness you're describing still require further tests. I'd like to schedule an MRI and possibly a CT scan to rule out any structural issues. You need to call your parents or guardian to obtain consent for the procedure. We will not proceed without it. Understand, Mr. Stark?" Tony pulled out his tab. Hermes has already found out her weakness. Oh, boy. This one is on the next level. But fuck him. How about we forget about parent consent? You can sign the documents instead and in return. He placed the tab on the table and slid it over to her. The proof of your husband fucking the head nurse behind your back or the 2 kids and another wife he's hiding in California. Dr. Harrington's eyes widened, and her cheeks flushed with anger. She picked up the tablet, examining the photos. I knew it. But, how did you? Doesn't matter. A favor for a favor, deal? He smiled, extending his hand. Fine, she growled. But the second the tests are done, you will give me those files. I'm going to tear that bastard apart. Cool down. I don't want you to get angry and mess up my tests. I promise you that you'll get the files once the tests are done. I can even give you the details of his hidden bank accounts and stocks. So, do your job, find out what's in my head, and you are rich and you can do whatever you want with your husband. Deal? Dr. Harrington stared at him. She was torn between her outrage and the prospect of gaining wealth and revenge. Deal, she agreed, shaking his hand. Tony lay on the slide bed, watching the ceiling of the MRI machine as its rhythmic hum filled his ears. It took some time, but the doctor managed to get him a rush order on an MRI. Then there was another scan. The procedure didn't take long, and after it was done, he was escorted back to the consultation room. The doc returned to the consultation room and her expression was telling it all. The results weren't good. She set the folder, containing the results, down on the desk and took a deep breath before speaking. Mr. Stark, the results are back, she began with a grim look. The scans show a mass in your brain. A tumor. It's located deep within the frontal lobe, near critical areas controlling cognitive functions. Tony kept his face calm. How bad is it? Dr. Harrington paused for a moment as she rechecked the files. The tumor can't be removed with surgery. It's in a spot where operating could cause severe harm to important areas of your brain. We can try radiation and chemotherapy, but because of its size and location, these treatments would probably only slow it down, not get rid of it completely. Early stage? He asked. Yes. Even though it's small at the moment, we believe it will keep growing. As it grows, it will put more pressure on your brain, leading to serious problems with your thinking and memory. Over time, you'll lose the ability to speak and control your movements. Mr. Stark, I'm sorry to tell you this, but, before she could finish, Tony interrupted. So, I'm going to die, right? How long do I have left? With constant treatment and medicine. Maybe 5 to 6 years, she explained. But that's just an estimate. Some people with this condition survive for years. I know it sounds impossible, but there are stories of patients who were told they had 2 years to live and they made it for 10 or 20. Everyone's case is different. There's always hope, Mr. Stark. Yeah. Hope. Tony didn't bother to argue. Thank you, Doc. He opened his tab and forwarded the information to her phone. As promised, here's everything I have. I'll leave the rest of it up to you. Have fun and thanks again. The doctor checked her phone. The files were there, and her husband was completely exposed. But she could care less about him. Right now, she was focused on Tony. Mr. Stark. She stepped toward him. Are you all right? Even she was surprised to see a young boy being so calm after receiving news like that. Anyone would freak out. No worries, document. It's just. You know, it was only a matter of time before my brain would kill me. He let out a small laugh. But, I have enough time to do what I want. Thank you. Sigh. She quickly scribbled a prescription for the pain and the dizziness. If the pain or dizziness gets worse, come back immediately. Also, call me anytime if you need anything. She handed him the slip of paper. And it's not my place to intervene with your personal life, but it's better if you inform anyone close and start the treatment as soon as possible. Yeah, will do. Thanks, document. Tony left the room and headed to the pharmacy. The pain had eased up, but it was still there. He needed some painkillers to deal with the rest of the day. After getting the prescription filled, he went to a nearby restaurant and decided to grab some burgers and Coke before heading home. He felt tired and a little overwhelmed by the news. Just when he thought he had a new life, death came knocking on his door. He knows the events that might happen in this reality. That tumor is going to become an infinity gem, and Reed's maker version will open up his brain while keeping him conscious, and he will rip it out, killing him. But he wasn't that desperate. Still, his hands trembled slightly as he ate his lunch. The food tasted bland, and his stomach was a knotted mess. Still, he forced himself to finish it. His body needed the energy. Tony pulled out his phone, debating whether or not to tell anyone about his diagnosis. But he decided to put it back in his pocket. Alright. Gotta kill Reed before he can become the maker and kill me. I'm not too familiar with this storyline, so, gotta act fast. He paid for his food and headed back to his dorm. As soon as he got there, he closed the door and locked it. He didn't want any interruptions. That he sat at his desk, staring at the array of monitors in front of him. The dull hum of his dorm room's air conditioning was the only sound, underscoring the tension in his mind. He wasn't new to danger or death. It was practically a constant in every universe, and he had already experienced it one before. But this wasn't some enemy he could outthink or outmaneuver. This was inside him. A tumor that might turn into an infinity gem if this really was the mishmash universe he feared. Tony clenched his fists, forcing the tremors in his hands to still. He couldn't afford weakness now. The stakes were too high. Hermes, he called out, and his tablet lit up with a soft chime. Find everything you can on Reed Richards. I want his current whereabouts, his research projects, associates, everything. Affirmative, Hermes responded in a neutral tone. Within moments, lines of data began scrolling across the screen. Also, cross-reference this with any anomalies or unexplainable incidents, superhuman incidents, advanced tech sightings, anything out of place. Hermes processed the command, compiling a report. Tony scanned it, his sharp mind cataloging every detail. Reed Richards existed in this world, a prodigy working on cutting-edge physics and dimensional theories at Empire State University. But only theories, so far. There was no indication he'd ever succeeded in making a device that could break through dimensions, but if it's true, then I can't let him get that far. I need to take him out. Tony's jaw tightened. Sunlight came through the blinds in Tony's small dorm room at MIT. Books, plans, and unfinished gadgets were scattered everywhere. It looked the same as always. The quiet sound of his servers and the soft beeps from Hermes, his computer, filled the room as it worked on his latest task. Tony sat at his desk with a cold cup of coffee next to him. His fingers kept tapping on the keyboard, even though the headache he felt made it feel like nails scratching glass. He stopped for a second, rubbing his temples. Hermes, he said, his voice rough. Give me an update on Reed Richards' activities. The AI's smooth voice responded instantly. Reed Richards has been spending an increasing amount of time at a private laboratory located on the outskirts of Manhattan. The lab was established 3 months ago under the guise of an independent research facility but is funded through anonymous donors, likely shell corporations tied to advanced tech firms. Tony's lips curled into a humorless smirk. Anonymous donors? Classic Reed. He's always hiding behind someone else's money. There is more, Hermes continued. Surveillance logs indicate irregular energy signatures emanating from the lab during night hours. Patterns match theoretical models for transdimensional energy manipulation. Tony's smirk faded. So, he's closer than I thought. The headache surged, sharp and relentless. He winced, gripping the edge of the desk as pain radiated through his skull. His vision blurred, the screen in front of him dissolving into meaningless patterns. Hermes, medication reminder, he grunted. Reminder, you have not yet taken the prescribed painkillers for the day. Tony grabbed the small bottle of pills sitting on the corner of his desk, popped 2 into his mouth, and washed them down with the lukewarm coffee. The bitter taste made him gag, but the relief that followed was worth it. It was now morning, and Tony had an exam to get through. He shoved his tablet and a few notebooks into his bag before heading out the door. The walk to his lecture hall was short, but every step felt like a marathon with the headache pounding away at his senses. His mind wasn't on the exam but on his survival. By noon, Tony was back in his dorm, staring at a detailed blueprint of Reed's lab. Hermes had managed to scrape the schematics from obscure municipal records. It was a fortress of cutting-edge tech and security systems, but it was still a building. It had weaknesses. Tony studied the blueprints for several hours, mapping out potential points of entry, blind spots in the security grid, and areas that could be disabled without triggering the entire system. But what if he hacks into the main system and destroys everything? Maybe a freak accident to kill Reed without physically getting his hands dirty. Hermes can do that. No one will ever know. Tony paced the length of his dorm room, the tension in his shoulders palpable as he mulled over his options. He wasn't a killer, not directly. Engineering solutions, subverting systems, and leveraging technology were his weapons. Taking a life was different. But if Reed Richards became the maker in this world, it wouldn't just be Tony's life at stake, it would be countless others. He stopped pacing and sat down, his hands gripping the edges of his desk. Hermes, refine the analysis. If I disable Reed's lab, what are the probabilities of collateral damage? The AI responded almost instantly. Simulations show that sabotaging the lab from a distance by targeting its power supply and containment systems has a 92% probability of complete destruction of the facility. However, there is a 67% probability of a critical energy discharge causing harm to surrounding areas. Fatalities cannot be ruled out. Tony frowned. That margin for collateral damage was too high. He needed precision, not chaos. He ran a hand through his hair, the throbbing in his head making it hard to focus. All right. Let's scale it back. Find me a way to isolate the energy systems without blowing the place sky high. Hermes processed for a moment before speaking. Solution: disruption of the primary containment field. The lab's energy manipulations rely on an uninterruptible power supply from a custom-built quantum generator. Disabling the generator would cease all transdimensional experiments without the risk of a catastrophic chain reaction. This requires physical access to the generator. Tony's eyes narrowed as he considered the risk. Breaking into the lab wasn't ideal, but it was starting to feel unavoidable. If he wanted precision, he'd have to do it himself. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the schematic on his screen. The generator was housed in the sub-basement, heavily shielded from external interference. It was Reed's pride and joy, no doubt. Hermes, start designing a disruption device. Something portable that can emit an EMP strong enough to temporarily disable the generator. Make it compact and fast-acting. Acknowledged, Hermes replied. The screen filled with schematics as the AI began designing the device. Meanwhile, Tony began to design a mini robot the size of his palm. The robot would carry the EMP disruptor into the lab and plant it near the generator. 1 month later, the past month had been a whirlwind of preparation. Between balancing his classes, keeping up appearances, and evading the growing pain in his head, Tony had poured every spare moment into his plan. If Reed Richards was on the cusp of a breakthrough that could lead to disaster, Tony needed to act before it was too late. Hermes's voice broke through the hum of machinery. Disruption device prototype completed. Ready for testing. Tony stood at a central workbench, a holographic blueprint of the EMP disruptor hovering in front of him. The device was compact and small enough to fit in his hand, yet powerful enough to overload Reed's custom quantum generator. Beside it sat a sleek, spider-like robot, designed to infiltrate the lab and deliver the disruptor to its target. Tony picked up the disruptor, examining it closely. Nice work, Hermes. What's the estimated success rate for deployment? Simulations indicate an 87% probability of successful delivery and activation. The remaining 13% accounts for unforeseen variables, including human intervention or mechanical failure. Tony frowned. Not perfect, but it'll have to do. Let's run a live test. Cue up the simulation environment. The lab transformed as holographic walls rose around him, creating a virtual replica of Reed's lab. Tony activated the spiderbot, watching as it scurried across the floor, navigating the holographic obstacles with precision. The bot reached the simulated generator, attached the disruptor, and activated it with a soft click. A pulse of light spread through the room, signaling a successful EMP discharge. Tony smiled faintly. Good. Now, let's make it smarter. Add adaptive algorithms so it can reroute if it encounters unexpected resistance. I want it thinking on its feet, or legs, in this case. Acknowledged, Hermes replied, beginning the reprogramming process. Tony sank into a nearby chair, rubbing his temples. The headaches had worsened over the past month, and the painkillers barely took the edge off anymore. He knew the tumor was growing, pressing against his brain, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. Not now. Progress on Richards, he asked. Hermes displayed a report on the nearest holographic screen. Reed Richards' lab has increased its activity. Energy signatures indicate he is nearing a breakthrough in his experiments. Estimated timeline for success, 2 weeks. Tony's jaw tightened. Then we move tomorrow night. I'm not giving him 2 weeks. The next night, Tony crouched on a rooftop overlooking Reed's lab, the spiderbot in his hand and the EMP disruptor secured in its payload. The cold night air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. His focus was on the task ahead. Through a pair of high-tech binoculars, he observed the lab's security systems. Reed had spared no expense. Cameras covered every angle, motion detectors swept the grounds, and drones patrolled the perimeter. It was impressive but not impregnable. Hermes, activate drone hacking protocol, Tony whispered. Fucker got advanced drones? Huh, but the security program is a joke. The tablet strapped to his arm displayed a live feed as Hermes took control of the patrolling drones. One by one, they froze midair, their systems overridden. Tony smiled. Step 1, complete. Step 2, infiltration. He set the spider bot on the roof's edge. Alright, little guy. Show me what you've got. The bot came to life, its 8 legs moving with mechanical precision as it descended the side of the building. Through its onboard camera, Tony watched as it approached a vent near the lab's main power conduit. The bot slipped inside, navigating the ducts with ease. Inside the lab, the bot moved swiftly, avoiding detection as it approached the generator in the sub-basement. Tony's heart pounded as the bot reached its destination. The quantum generator was an imposing machine, humming with barely contained energy. Deploy the disruptor, Tony commanded. The bot extended an arm, attaching the EMP device to the generator. A countdown appeared on Tony's screen, 30 seconds to activation. Suddenly, alarms blared. The lab's security systems detected the bot's presence. Tony cursed under his breath. Hermes, what triggered it? Unknown. Security override detected. Likely manual intervention. On the screen, Tony saw Reed Richards entering the room. He looked younger than Tony had expected, his face lit with curiosity rather than fear. Reed approached the generator, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the spiderbot. What the hell is this? Reed muttered, reaching for the bot. Activate EMP, now. Tony barked. The bot emitted a high-pitched whine as the EMP device activated. A burst of energy rippled through the room, cutting power to the generator and plunging the lab into darkness. Reed stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the sudden flash. Tony didn't wait to see the aftermath. Hermes, quick. Take control and crawl up to Reed's head and self-destruct. He watched as the spiderbot surged forward in the darkness, its 8 legs glinting in the faint emergency lights that flickered on. Hermes' adaptive algorithms took over, guiding the bot with precision. Reed Richards, still disoriented by the EMP blast, barely had time to react. The bot leaped onto Reed's shoulder, its legs gripping tightly as it crawled toward his head. Panic flashed in Reed's eyes as he swatted at the mechanical invader, but his movements were sluggish, his body still reeling from the electromagnetic shockwave, and the metal legs of the bot pierced through his skin. Sitting on his head, the bot's metallic legs clamped down with brutal efficiency, anchoring itself atop Reed's head. Sparks danced from its compact frame, a harbinger of the destructive power it held within. Reed flailed, his arms clawing at the invasive machine as panic took hold. "Get off me!" Reed gasped, his voice cracking with desperation, but it was too late. "Hermes," Tony whispered coldly, his voice steady despite the pounding in his head. "Do it. Make it clean." Command acknowledged, the AI responded, its tone devoid of emotion. The countdown was instant, the mechanism precise. A high-pitched whine crescendoed as the bot discharged its payload, a focused burst of energy that overloaded Reed's neural pathways, silencing his thoughts and body in one swift, catastrophic pulse. Reed crumpled to the ground, his body lifeless before it hit the polished floor. The spiderbot sparked and twitched, its own systems fried by the controlled detonation. Smoke curled from its frame, the only evidence of the lethal encounter. Tony exhaled sharply, his hands gripping the edge of the rooftop as he stared at the live feed on his tablet. For a moment, the room on the screen was still. Only the faint hum of backup power systems and the quiet crackle of short circuits broke the silence. "Hermes, status report," Tony demanded, his voice low and rough. "Primary target neutralized. No external breaches detected. Lab systems remain non-functional. Local authorities have not been alerted." Tony nodded, his expression unreadable. He leaned back against the rooftop wall, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Copy the data from the main server. Erase the footage," he ordered. "Scrub everything. No trace. Then blow up the place." "Affirmative." As Hermes worked, Tony closed his eyes, the throbbing pain in his skull momentarily eclipsed by the enormity of what he had done. Reed Richards was gone, his brilliant mind extinguished. The potential threat he posed, one that could have unraveled dimensions, had been averted. Yet, the air around Tony felt heavier, the victory hollow. Was it the right choice?